What does it mean to be a man? Is it facial hair or an obsession with meat? Is it bulging muscles or so many sexual conquests that you can't even remember your partner's names? Most of those symbols of manliness get credited, rightfully or not, to testosterone, one of the major sex hormones. While folks with ovaries might be more familiar with hormones because they play such a central role in daily life, men have been obsessed with testosterone for different reasons. Even since before the discovery of hormones, we knew that some substance in the testes was responsible for the male aspect of reproduction. Basically, whatever the essence of manliness was, we would probably find it in the testes. Even the ancient Greeks saw the overlap between the time that the testicles dropped and the time that those secondary sex characteristics developed, like facial hair or a deepening voice. Then, fast forward a couple of years past the we knew zero things about nothing stage of anatomy up to the mid-1800s. We got that wild testicle transplant thing from Berthold, which I made a video about right here. But quick summary, a scientist saw that completely chopping off testicles from a rooster made it less aggressive, but chopping the testes off and implanting a different testicle into their gut let them maintain their aggressiveness. And to me, that's pretty peak weird science, but back in 1889, a really well-respected French scientist named Charles Edward Brown-Séquard pretty much replicated the experiment on himself. He injected himself with secretions from guinea pig and dog testicles and noticed some changes. It was like he was a young man again. He had an increased sex drive, he had more energy at night, and he even pooped more regularly. That's right, normal poops, not just a young man's game. And if you're sitting there thinking this is way too unscientific, you are totally right. Brown-Séquard used way too low of a concentration to have any kind of effect on his actual biology, but even back then, men had this strong mental picture that the testicles contained something essentially masculine. Now, that was back over 120 years ago, and as obsessed as we've always been with buffing up our manliness, we would dive way deep into that obsession over the next few decades. Like we saw earlier in the series, hormones were properly discovered in the early 1900s and research took off after that. We're gonna see a common theme in a lot of these early testosterone studies, and it's that this hormone affects behavior, specifically libido, or someone's sex drive. But arguably one of the weirdest practices came from an Austrian physiologist named Eugen Steinac. I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I gotta give this guy some credit though. He did learn a lot about cells that line the sperm duct, called Leydig cells, and how they produce testosterone. And he was doing endocrinology experimentation at a time when hormones were still really new. Like in 1912, just a few years after Bayliss and Starling's work, he implanted guinea pig testicles into female and castrated male guinea pigs and saw that they became more aggressive and displayed some of that typical male sexual behavior. Not that this was a new idea, but now we had a growing body of research to say that some kind of chemical in the testicles was responsible for some aspect of sexuality, which is a broad idea. Steinac decided to apply this idea to humans, which is where things got weird. He developed a surgery called the Steinac vasoligature. Vaso meaning vessel and ligature meaning to tie off. And I'll give you a second to guess what vessel we're tying off here. It's not a blood vessel, it's a sperm vessel. Yep, Steinac was attempting to revamp men's sex lives by performing vasectomies, a procedure where the doctor snips or ties off the vas deferens, the tube that carries sperm from the testes to the urethra. And it was already a well-established sterilization surgery since way before Steinac. He thought that by doing a unilateral vasectomy, or only cutting one of the vas deferens instead of both, the body would compensate by producing more testosterone, which would make the man feel younger and sexier again. And there were plenty of people that were like, yeah, we're pretty sure that doesn't work. Plenty of men still got the surgery. Which, if you base a scientist's success off of the number of willing participants they get and not accuracy, that makes this dude a genius. Luckily, the 1920s and 30s gave us some actual good science. There was Fred Koch, who isolated the hormone from a bull testicle, and if you've ever been to a county fair before, you know those things are not lacking testosterone. A couple years later, in 1935, Ernst Lacour extracted pure testosterone and named it after, you guessed it, the testes. This was around the same time that scientists isolated estrogen as well, so we were starting to get an idea of how similar they were chemically. If you remember back to the estrogen episode, the sex hormones are just fancy cholesterol. Testosterone is produced mostly in the testes by those Leydig cells and in some amount by the adrenal cortex. The brain can also synthesize testosterone from cholesterol, and it can be converted from progesterone. And don't forget, the ovaries can produce testosterone too. This isn't just a male hormone. Researchers did start to wonder why testosterone production seemed to slow after age 30, and it was mostly due to those cells in the testes and less production of our old friend, gonadotropin-releasing hormone, or GnRH. And that decline over time, about 1% per year, might be a measure of overall health as opposed to a function of just old age. Regardless, men tend to produce less testosterone as time goes on. So quick check of our historical lens here. 1945 rolls around and the hormone marketing starts taking off. It was that year that a guy named Paul de Cruif releases this super popular book called The Male Hormone, which just had some poetry in it, like manhood is chemical, manhood is testosterone. And like, check out this cover. The male hormone discloses magic for beyond the merely sexual. It boosts muscle power, it banishes mental fatigue, it eases heart pain, it even restores the sanity of men in middle life who suffer from physical deficiencies. And remember where family planning was heading back then. De Cruif's audience were the men who would eventually father the baby boomer generation, but the science wasn't exactly legit. These claims were implied from hormone injections done on the testicularly impaired, a way of referring to people who had had testicular injury or for whatever reason couldn't produce normal levels of testosterone. The biggest improvements in sex-driven muscle mass came from when you took someone with very low testosterone and got them up into the mid-normal range. But there's a big difference between adding hormones to fix a deficiency and adding hormones as some kind of performance enhancer. It wants to maintain homeostasis, a nice sweet spot. If it gets out of that middle ground, it needs to compensate somehow. Like if you were a professional athlete and already lifting weights and already producing a lot of testosterone, anything on top of that would just be overkill and have some gnarly side effects. Oh no. Of course, we totally did that in the form of anabolic steroids. Anabolic just means to build up, so these synthetic testosterone injections were meant to make muscles grow. When the steroid gets into your bloodstream, it binds to an androgen receptor on muscle cells, then interacts with the cell's DNA to stimulate protein synthesis. Then the weightlifter or baseball player trains normally, but sees way bigger results. But remember, your body wants a predictable, just right level of hormones. So those side effects like shrunken testicles or acne or male breast development, known as gynecomastia, can be attributed to those messed up levels of hormones. This also means lower natural testosterone production and lower sperm count once you come off of steroids. Prescription steroids can be good news for the people who need them, but chances are you're not one of them. But that didn't stop men from wanting them, especially when they became available direct to consumer. Plenty of people are spooked by injections, but anybody can put a gel on themselves. So in the year 2000, testosterone gels like Androgel hit the market. A couple things. If you watch daytime TV or sports commentary, then you are guaranteed to at some point see a commercial of a 50-something-year-old man with salt and pepper hair throw a football, then climb in a truck with his wife by his side, and you're like, yeah, they're totally gonna... You know. Of course, the implication is that these products are going to fundamentally change your sex life because of the magic wand that is testosterone. So that's one thing, marketing. The other thing took advantage of a very predictable male behavior. Men are super resistant to going to the doctor and way less likely to talk about reproductive health than women. Like, for real, this is a studied public health phenomenon. Knowing that they wouldn't see unlimited success in the doctor's office meant that product marketing teams had to expand beyond the prescription pad. A pharmaceutical company called Organon even went as far as hiring a doctor to come up with a questionnaire called the Atom Survey that allowed men to find out for themselves if testosterone therapy would be right for them. Hey, pro tip, if a drug company comes to you with a survey with a way too fitting acronym, it's probably gonna result with money in their pockets. So now you could say, look doc, I think I got low testosterone, or low T as the disease got rebranded. How do you rebrand a disease? But that's another problem. Like, what counts as low testosterone? As we saw earlier in the video, hormone replacement therapy really doesn't do much good unless the patient is very low on testosterone. So that 1% drop per year probably doesn't put you in that category. And with all of these marketing mess-ups, you'd think that we'd know more about testosterone, but there's still a lot that we don't know. Like, we still aren't certain on the long-term effects of testosterone therapy and heart disease. According to a 2018 review, low blood testosterone looks like it's associated with higher risk of cardiovascular disease and overall mortality in certain populations, but not in men that naturally produce less testosterone. So is that just because like old men tend to have low testosterone and old men tend to die? Well, a separate 2018 review suggested that testosterone replacement therapy puts users at increased risk of cardiovascular disease. Full disclosure, there are some conflicting results on this one, but they tend to back up an FDA recommendation from 2015 that says that these therapies should be reserved for the patients who really need them. Now, if we're so unsure of the risks, why are men pushing for it so hard? I'm gonna encourage you not to look at this one physiologically, but to imagine this one more complexly. Throughout this video, we've seen that men are really insecure about the status of their manliness. Like, to the point of dropping serious money to fix what they think is a deficiency. But if you're watching this and you identify as a man, I want to assure you, you're doing fine. There's nothing deficient about you. There are a lot of things about masculinity we need to fix first if we want to leave a better society for our kids to inherit. And one of the first things we need to do is drop the idea that our success as men is determined by the size of our muscles or the number of our sexual partners or at all determined by the number on a ruler. You know what I'm talking about. If your version of masculinity is doing something good for someone else, or giving wholeheartedly without expecting reward, or using your privilege to amplify voices that others have silenced, then you're a hell of a man, and I'm proud of you. So to come back to the intro of the episode, what makes a real man? I don't know. But I don't think it's just testosterone. Have fun, be good, and I'll see you next time.